So I just rolled into Yosemite for the season, and I'm stoked for some El Cap climbing starting tomorrow. But did you get that? Okay, anyways. So I've got a bunch of questions from you all, and I've got things on multi-pitch, lead rope solo, and big wall climbing. I love sharing useful resources through Avant. My two primary driving motivators for Avant are, one, to create useful gear for myself and then replicate it for the masses. And then second is to share free, useful information on the internet for rock climbing. All right, let's start off with some multi-pitch questions. Number one, best way to get your shoes up with you and food, snacks, backpacks feeling restrictive and not a fan of haul bags for only a couple pitches. Exactly. So I'm a big fan of the snack pack. As I've mentioned, the snack pack is light, just like a chalk bag. Water goes on your harness on the gear loops because it's heavier, better distributed with the waist belt of your harness itself. But shoes, I do have a philosophy on this. I think approach shoes are different than descent shoes. So approach shoes, hiking shoes are what I wear to the base of the climb. And just like I've talked about with backpackless climbing, I do bring more to the base of the route so many times than what I bring up the route, because you often walk back to the base. So if I'm doing something like Red Rocks, for example, our approach, a hike to the base, and then you often come back down to the pack. So I'll wear comfortable approach shoes, TX4s, whatever you like. But I'll often leave those at the base, and then I'll carry what I call descent shoes. It's not actually a term yet. But that is just a super lightweight, minimal, maybe a barefoot type shoe that weighs half as much or less and is less bulky than an approach shoe. And that is just clipped onto my harness just like a water bottle. So on the back I have water bottle, shoes. It does make your harness heavy, but I much prefer it to being in a backpack. Multi-pitch climbing, safest way to simulclimb on easy/moderate terrain. So on my personal blog post, I wrote a whole blog post on modern multi-pitch simulclimbing, and I go super deep in that blog post. I would highly recommend reading that. But general premise is you always have progress capturing pulleys between you at all times, and you need a system of commands to ensure that is the fact. And then you are belaying with a gree-gree from below, and you're effectively giving a running belay. So it's not so different than belaying, walking a little bit, belaying, walking a little bit. You are climbing, belaying a little bit, climbing, belaying a little bit, and that allows you to pause and give your partner, your leader, a real belay if they need it, but otherwise you can climb with the gree-gree and modulate slack in with one hand. So to summarize, the gree-gree modulates the slack and you can pull in with one hand. You can't give slack out unless you stop, but you can often stop at a variety of stances along the way. Go read the blog post. Multi-pitch, efficiency on changing from one pitch to the next. There's so much to go into for that. My main premise would be, while you're at the belay, do something useful. So while you're top belaying, make sure you are racking your gear on one side where your partner's coming up so they can grab it and re-rack for themselves. Eat a snack, look at the topo. Do something useful while you're top belaying. That's my main advice for efficiency, because then once your partner gets there, you have a plan of how to change over and keep things moving. You could go really deep on that one, but that's a good tip. Multi-pitch climbing, how do you make rappelling as efficient as possible? That's another one you could take in a ton of different directions, and there are plenty of geeky guides on the internet that will tell you 101 ways to make rappelling more efficient. And my premise is you should know one way to rappel efficiently, and you should do it over and over and over and over. And I would even take that to the extent of, when you are doing a set of rappels down a route, you and your partner should designate a leader and a follower and stick with it for that entire time. And you just do the same thing at every transition, and you'll get faster and you'll get down quicker. Okay, multi-pitch climbing, tagline rappels. Best way to unstuck ropes while rappelling when using a tagline. So that is inferring that when you use a pull cord, there's a moment when you're let go of your lead line while you're pulling your pull cord down. I don't have any specific thoughts there other than make sure your rope is moving freely before you let go of the lead line. Otherwise, if you are concerned about that sort of thing, there are pull cords that can work as an emergency lead line, such as the Edelrid backup line, or a few other 6mm and up ropes, you might want to look into that if you're doing some sort of terrain that you might face that concern. Multi-pitch climbing. When should fix and follow be used in multi other than traversing pitches? What about in lowish 5th class scenarios where there might be slots between blocks? How much of a concern would you have about that? So, great point. Fix and follow multi-pitch climbing is not for every multi-pitch scenario. Specifically, it's for when there's no one below you, because you just let the entire rope dangle straight down in space, slash, if it's low angle, 5th class terrain, low-ish 5th class scenario, as I mentioned, it's resting on the rock and it's snaking up through all those blocks while you're hauling it up to belay. I've found in practice that the rope hanging straight down with no knots doesn't get tangled very often unless it's windy, even on lowish terrain. I think it's surprising how little difficulty there is with that sort of situation, but definitely use caution. I think it's best for modern steep routes that are clean and relatively low vegetation and loose blocks. And again, once more, when there's no one below you. Multi-pitch. Can you do a full video on multi-pitch efficiency tips? Good point. I will do some thought on that. Maybe I can loop in Amity or a friend to help explain. I would love to show my single way of going multi-pitch climbing. Yet again, there's so many ways on the internet to do something, and in practice, I pretty much do the same thing every time. And that lets me be really good at doing those tactics, and I know what to do, and it goes quickly. Multi-pitch climbing. How should you determine the length, quantity, and type of rope to bring for a given objective? Basically, what are your thought processes for which ropes to bring? So even this morning, I had to make this decision. And my personal thoughts are to go skinny on the lead line, short as possible. Basically, my thoughts are to reduce rope weight. And rope weight is really indicated so often in grams per meter, which is a more useful metric than the diameter of the rope. So if you're shopping for a rope, look at grams per meter, but then you'll notice that meters is in there and it's a multiplier. So many people think about lightweight beaners, lightweight cams, and then they bring a 70 meter, 80 meter rope, a route where they could have used a 40 meter rope and then walked off. So I do think it's a great point. Basically, I bring the skinniest and shortest rope for the objective that's reasonable. As far as skinniness, that is somewhat determined by how many times I think I'm gonna fall. So I'm not necessarily worried about the rope cutting or abrasion, core shotting from being skinnier, but it's just not gonna last as long. But I climb on 8.5 to 9 millimeter ropes all the time for multi-pitch climbing and love it. For sport cragging, they just get beat up and they're actually harder to grab for boinking and such. So some rope thoughts. For static ropes, I pretty much use my 10 millimeter semi-static rope as go-to, and I think that's a great diameter. Multi-pitch climbing, how to transition a fix and follow system efficiently for multi-pitch leads. So fix and follow multi-pitch climbing, the leader is tied into the tail of the rope. The rope is all the way down, hanging in space, and the follower comes up on it, but is not at that tail. So it is most efficient to lead in blocks. The follower can come up, clip their PAS in, and then actually take one of their progress capturing pulleys and flip it upside down and immediately start hauling up the rope. They'll clip it up high on an anchor and have an ergonomic position to haul up the rope, haul up a 20-foot head start, put on your gree-gree to put your leader back on belay, clip a high point at the anchor, and you're pretty much ready to go. And honestly, you can do that as fast as I just described it. So for fix and follow transitions, lead in blocks as much as possible, and it'll take a minute to do transitions. There's so many arguments online on multi-pitch technique that it makes it convoluted. Yes, I love this. What's the best way to approach practice multi-technique as a beginner? And how does one identify a technique as being safe and effective versus risky and clunky? Such a good point. I really think it's a detriment to multi-pitch systems that there's so many options being prescribed on the internet. Again, I'll make the joke, 101 ways to do something. When I go multi-pitch climbing, I pretty much do the same thing over and over and over. And how I would think about that is you need to know how to lead belay. That's just standard practice. I would probably use a gree-gree, lead belay just like you would at the crag. And then once your leader gets up there, they need to know how to build an anchor in top belay. And what I do for building an anchor is I use a double shoulder length sling or a quad, and I use that pretty much no matter what. Bolted anchors, trad gear. I connect it down to 2 main points, even if a few cams are connected to one of those arms. And then I just use my quad or V knotted sling. So simple anchor building. And then for top belaying, an ATC guide is a foolproof method, really great. And you just belay your partner up, stacking rope over your PAS. That takes some practice, but it's not too bad. And then once they get up, you pretty much just switch over the rack to whoever is headed off and begin to lead belay once again. Lead belaying on a multi-pitch route is a bit of a hassle with a gree-gree or auto-blocking device. It is hard to not short rope the person. Those loops of slack do tend to get tangled. I think that just comes down to practice and trying to stay ahead of it and having maybe a 20-foot droop. That's your kind of your cash loop for multi-pitch belaying, really. That keeps things spaced out. All right, that was it for multi-pitch questions. Let's move on to slightly more niche. Big wall climbing. So, do you have tips for keeping your skin healthy after days on the wall? So if you're up there and the question here, my nail beds always separate super quickly and my climbing really deteriorates, really goes down as a result. So if you've ever been big wall climbing, you know the pain of your nail pulling away from your skin and creating a really, really painful gap, basically cracking under your fingernail. And I have faced this and I have 2 keys to avoid this. One is I pack my nail beds with Neosporin every night. I first clean my hands with wet wipes every night and then I pack them with Neosporin. That is key. Clean skin grows back faster. And then second, if it's painful, it can really be a showstopper. It's really a thorn in your heel up on the wall. Really hard for big wall free climbing. And a key savior can be super glue. So if you looked at the big wall pack list that we provide on avantclimbing.com for free, you'll see that I have super glue listed. It's not for fixing bags, it's for fixing my fingernails. And I'll literally just put a bead of super glue along my fingernail bed, and that'll pretty much reduce pain all day long. It's great. It works like magic. So Neosporin and super glue, that's the answer. Big wall, efficient aid tactics. How to best rack gear like cams, hooks, nuts, and things for efficient flow on aiders. For light and fast walls where there's a bivvy, what do you bring for bivvy, food, and water? I might give this one a pass because I pretty much go 2 ways. I go in a day or I go really slow, like 8 days long. I think it's pretty hard to go 2-day missions. You have to just rough it. It's basically the answer. You bring minimal food, minimal water. But for the aid climbing side, instead of racking all the carabiners directly on your gear loop, you can rack a cam on the gear loop and then rack all subsequent cams of the same size on that beaner. So kind of beaner on beaner action, and that create branches of sizes. So it makes your gear loops fan out a little less. So there's a tip. Big wall climbing. Do you prefer to haul, thinking of LCAP, with a static rope, or you using a dynamic rope in case of failure to your main line? Do I use a static line or a dynamic line to haul? I definitely use a static line. I just use that same 10mm semi-static rope. That's my go-to. The rope that Amity and I hauled El Nino with is still my go-to top rope solo cragging rope. So great all-around option. When you say case of a dynamic rope failure, you probably mean core shot. Best case of core shot is near one end or the other. This is usually how it happens. And in that case, you just either have to do shorter pitches or get creative. But I think rarely does your entire rope fail. You just have to do shorter pitches. Even if that meant splitting up pitches and doing hang belays, that would be your way to get out of there. Or you have a haul line to rappel to bail. Big wall climbing. Best packing necessities and tips for trying to be fast and light as possible. Example, one-night walls. Back to this one. I think one-night walls are really hard. You're basically gonna do a shiver bivvy and bring nothing. It's really difficult to haul just a few things. So I would recommend maybe like a 2 or 3 day wall. Go comfortable, bring enough to enjoy the camping experience, or just go big and do it in a day. Personal preference. Big wall, an explanation of keeping the belay loop area from looking like a total mess while aid climbing lead rope solo. Okay, big wall / lead rope solo. I tend to have a lot going on. Fifi, gree-gree, quick connect. I'll free freeze, anchor end of the rope. Well, it keeps going. Slack, cash loop. How can I clean this up? great point. Lead rope solo, big wall, aid climbing. It's a lot of adjectives. Is complicated, and maybe the one tip I would have is to use one of those harnesses with 2 belay loops. I think that would be a good go-to. Otherwise, just try to minimize every single system. So your aid system, try to keep it minimal. Your daisy, free system, try to keep it minimal. 2 belay loops is probably the answer. Big wall climbing, favorite haul system. So maybe I'll show this when we do a little bit of big wall prep in the coming weeks. But my favorite haul system is the 2-to-1 Mark Houdon special. Look up Mountain Project, search those keywords and it'll surely come up. Basically, you have your haul line going through a pulley, progress capturing pulley, like a traction. You even can just use a micro traction because you're not yarding on that itself. And then separately, you have a 2-to-1 ratchet setup that puts an ascender on the rope and pulls it upwards with a set of pulleys. I probably did that pattern wrong. With a set of pulleys to apply a 2-to-1 force, which also means the bag goes half as far for every haul motion. But I highly recommend sticking with it. The first time you do a 2-to-1 haul, you'll think the bag is not moving at all. But if you really set it up correctly, all you do is you sit down. So you sit down to the deepest squat that's comfortable, and then you pull up on the anchor. And the sitting down, you're not like kicking against the wall. The sitting down is doing all the hauling, so you're just doing a bunch of squats in a row. But with that system, optimizing down to the inch is really crucial. So take the time when you're beginning the haul to get it just right. Get those ergonomics set up perfectly, and it'll pay off for the hundreds of squats you're about to do. Okay, big wall climbing. Thoughts on the PDL for efficiency, maybe paired with the running clove hitch. So that's some LCAP cool guy talk. PDL, Pakistani death loop. So if you're speed climbing on LCAP, often you'll short fix, which means you lead a pitch and you fix your rope for your partner to jug the pitch and clean it. But instead of fixing right at your end of the rope, you pull up 20 feet, 50 feet, whatever you're comfortable with, and fix at that point. And then you take that 20 to 50 feet and you have a head start and you can begin climbing while your partner jugs. Basic premise. It's a head start on the next pitch. The Pakistani death loop is doing that with no protection. So you just free solo with a 20 foot to 50 foot personal anchor system. I never do that. I think it's a bad idea. You can also use really basic lead rope solo tactics. Basically a gree-gree upside down on your belay loop, and you set it up as if you were just going to rappel down that tail, and you're still tied in on the other side. And you can even use a traction for a little mini cash loop. That's what I'd recommend. Don't use the PDL. Use some lead rope solo technique. Knowledge is power. All right, we're getting more niche here. Now on to some lead rope solo questions. All right, lead rope solo traverses, how to manage the cleaning. That is indeed pretty difficult. So you just got to an anchor, you have protection points going across, and you have your rope. What is gonna happen as you start rappelling down this strand, you're gonna go like this. You're gonna go down and create a V. So while you're going down here, you're just gree-greeing, and your full weight's on the gree-gree. But once you get to this side, you're gonna need ascenders to basically ascend back up to this point. And then once you're here, you're gonna wanna use a PAS to go in straight. And then you pull tight, and then rappel down again. Then you gree-gree down this part. So I never took the gree-gree off at this point. I just used the PAS to take the weight off the gree-gree, to pass the gree-gree past that protection point, and then reverse down and ascend back up. So you do that over and over, back to your other anchor. And then when you come back this way, but that's only to go across the pitch. That's not actually the cleaning step. The cleaning step, you need to undo this gear. And what that realistically looks like is unclipping the gear and swinging down here, and then ascending up. If there's a fixed ring or you could even leave a carabiner, you could do a lower out, but I'm not going to explain beyond that. I think the key premise for the lead soloing that's different is actually getting back across the pitch. Once you're here, it's just standard big wall climbing techniques. All right, more lead rope solo questions. Maybe these need more whiteboarding if things get complicated. Specifically, lead rope solo on trad routes without bolts would be something I'm interested in. Kind of honestly comes down to basic trad climbing premise, but you just build directional anchors upwards for catching lead rope solo falls. So honestly, not that different. It's one of these that if you know really good trad climbing fundamentals, you know how to build anchors in all directions, and you know how to lead rope solo really proficiently, it should all come together nicely. So not gonna say too much more there. Maybe not exactly this, but how do I speed up my lead rope solo transitions on trad multi-pitch? I would start by investigating what the constraint is. So you asked the question very broadly. I would ask, is it the tangle of gear at the belay? Is it rebuilding the anchor the different direction? Maybe do a little investigation further. I'm trying to think of a useful nugget. Basic one, but maybe when you clean your gear on the previous pitch, rack it in order. Figure out the constraint and try to solve it one piece at a time. Lead rope solo, big wall climbing. Explain the continuous loop system with a semi-static haul line. I know the primary rope is a dynamic. I've read the Andy Kirkpatrick book and it is still unclear to me. So the Andy Kirkpatrick book called Me, Myself, and I is a great resource for rope solo climbing, especially if you're gonna go quest up alone and spend many days up there solving problems. You wanna know a lot of things to be up doing that. But I'll try to do a quick demonstration of the continuous loop system. So the premise of that is when you're lead rope soloing a multi-pitch route, your rope looks like this. It's fixed. It's the protection side. It's going through some pieces of protection to you, cash loop, and then the free side's blowing in the wind down to a bag of rope. And if you're big wall climbing, you would normally be leading with the haul line also hanging down and feeding out of a bag. There's no partner to manage it, so you better have stacked it well. And you'll see I drew the haul line pretty fat. The haul line is indeed fat and heavy most of the time. So as the previous questions indicate, there's so much going on when you're big wall lead soloing. So the continuous loop method takes the haul line and puts it down here. You tie it to the tail of the lead rope and it's underneath the lead rope. It could be in a separate bag, but it's tied together. And the advantage there once you're up at the next ledge, your lead line might not come all the way down, but your haul line is tied to it. And that allows you to haul up the haul line under the lead line. So basically you go from 2 ropes hanging off you down to 1. That's the real advantage. Hope that was clear. Lead rope solo and what to do at a belay station to avoid factor 2 falls on the main anchor. Cool, maybe we're in the whiteboard flow here. So say I'm lead rope soloing Father Time. I just did this pitch, and then it's quite scary right here. The normal premise, what I did down here, I probably used this anchor, and I fixed the rope, and it headed up the pitch. But if you're off the ground, what you can do, instead of fixing the rope here, you can actually use the previous bolts. So I could do that, use 2 bolts in line, Or even what you can do is you can leave your rope down here. If the pitches are shorter together than the rope itself, you can do it like this. I never even refix up here. I have all this other rope in the system to give a soft catch. And then the third thing you could do is bring a comfort catch absorber. And use the last bolt on the previous pitch to do a 2-bolt inline sport climbing anchor effectively, just like we've talked about a ton on the channel. All right, enough talking to camera. It's time to go prep for climbing tomorrow. Knock, knock.
Hi.
You want to rack up?
Yeah.
No way.
I think we're going up there. Maybe a little higher.
Yeah.
Is that the stem corner up there?